Basil. Once the crusade arrived in Trelia, Ikesu's capital, D4 announced they would be stopping for the next few days. While there, the Ikesuish general, D3, would coordinate with D4 to integrate the armies of Vetron and Ikesu with the latest recruits into a new formation. The horn would blow to announce their continuation through Ikesu toward Gia. As anticipated, Teleost excused himself from the back lines to tend to his administrative duties, and Brusite and Anates departed to present themselves to Low Queen Amatrine. Unlike ruling lords and ladies, it was far more expected for mages to present themselves to monarchs. Therefore, Basil couldn't skip the formality. He would need to introduce himself to the queen, too. Basil sought out his master in the campsite in preparation for the announcement. While Basil had enjoyed meeting Turmeric, it had been awkward visiting him without his master. Meeting Rosemary had been straightforward from Basil's perspective, for Watercress had done all of the talking. "Good morning, master." Watercress was in the middle of picking up his tent, and Basil aided him. "Thank you, Basil, and good morning." "The tome's coming along well. I've finished reading the linguistics chapters." "Good, good." "Are we to introduce ourselves to Trelia's healing mage? Master Poppy, right?" Watercress hesitated, which intrigued Basil. His master was never unprepared to discuss anything. Basil speculated it was because Watercress would be visiting his old romantic interest from his days at the college again. I am going to see Master Poppy, but I do not want you to introduce yourself for now. Wait for me to get you. First, I must ensure something," Watercress said. "What's that?" Basil tried not to sound too smug. He had a feeling his master wanted some time alone with Poppy, but he wanted to hear him say it. "You remember I told you some mages are dangerous? Well, I want to ensure everything will be all right for you to meet Poppy, and her apprentice if Lavender's around." Watercress lifted his tent and supplies into Boss New's cart. He's lying. It hurt Basil that his master didn't trust him enough to be honest about his previous relationship. "Just please stay with the campsite for now. I shouldn't be long." Basil scowled. "I apologize. I need to complete a few errands alone first." He left Basil at the emptying campsite. Previously, Basil had intended to leave the camp, seeking regular work as a mason or other trade to work toward earning the remaining wages required for 9. However, he would have plenty of time for that later. Instead, his deep curiosity drove him to discover his master's need for secrecy. Basil tailed Watercress to Trelia's main gate. From afar, the city seemed like Nanbia, but in addition to the massive guild hall, Trelia also had the garden castle and cathedral for the generous, named after Losihei, the patron archangel of Ikesu. The city spiraled upward to the 3 most prominent buildings. Leading to the city was a long and wide stone bridge over a raging river that poured off into a series of waterfalls. The waterfalls fed sophisticated irrigation apparatuses and water wheels. Given the heavy foot traffic across the bridge, Basil hoped Watercress wouldn't notice him. The Ikesuish guards waved everyone in through the iron gates to simplify the process. When Basil entered the City of Gardens, his initial thought was that vegetation had overtaken it. But when he looked again, the inhabitants had incorporated trees, bushes, and herbs into their buildings perfectly. Sweet, fragrant flowers bloomed everywhere. If he had thought he had wanted to settle in Nanbia, he was mistaken. He wanted to live the rest of his days in Trelia. The city could not improve in any way. Sculptures stood out in the middle of piazzas surrounded by vines, laughter, and music. Oil lamps lined the streets, providing function and decor. Stone fountains at waist height offered a consistent source of the mountain's clean drinking water to any passerby. Glass-protected paintings hung on the side of every street corner. Even the people's dress was unique, with overlapping lace layers, embroidered floral patterns, and bright fabrics Basil had never seen before. When the suns shone, they illuminated the beauty of Trelia without blinding him. White, black, and mint banners flapped in a gentle breeze, and a banner with green, blue, and purple waved near them. Basil hadn't immediately recognized the second color scheme. Based on the paper peacocks stuck in the windows and bushes, the crusade had arrived during the Festival of the Peacock, an annual celebration dedicated to Losihei for blessing the physical world upon her death as an archangel. As much as Basil wanted to take in the sights, he needed to follow his master. Darting through the crowds, he passed friendly city folk who greeted him and occasionally peddled goods. When Watercress entered a multi-level hospital, Basil had an uneasy feeling about remaining out of sight. He had to try, however. He had to know what his master had wanted to keep from him. Navigating through the halls, none of the hospital staff said anything to him. Basil hoped they mistook him for someone visiting a patient. After Watercress ducked into a room, Basil waited to follow him until he moved on to the next. The room Basil entered appeared to be an empty waiting room. On the opposite side of the office, a door stood ajar. Basil crouched and crept over to it to listen in, catching sight of his master in a laboratory. He couldn't see Poppy past Watercress's sapphire cloak, but he could hear them speaking well enough. Poppy. Glass shattered. Basil guessed it was a test tube. Silence engrossed them. I didn't think I'd ever see you again, Poppy said flatly. So what? You come all this way, show up after all this time, and you have nothing to say? I have so much to say, Watercress said. I don't know where to start. You had plenty of time. It's been what, 16 rotations? She snapped. And the weeks of the journey over? It's complicated, Watercress said. Typically, his master was so eloquent. Basil couldn't believe he was at a loss for words now. You could begin by explaining this. A wooden drawer screamed open as Poppy dragged it along an uneven track. She grabbed a crumpled piece of paper within and threw it at him. Was that the note telling you I was taking on an apprentice? Watercress asked. Yes. I'm glad it reached you. I was never sure. Basil pitied Watercress. His master must have posted nearly 1,000 letters to Poppy. Basil hadn't realized she never responded. Watercress received almost as many letters as he sent otherwise. That's not something you say in a letter. I deserved an explanation, in person, as to why you tossed away our future. Our plans to revolutionize healing magic through our research, to supplant Master Gentian as the high healing mage, all those dreams you whispered about past curfew in the dormitories. I thought you would come in person to explain. Instead, I got regular updates of your glorious life with your apprentice. I'm glad you received those too. You could have bothered to pay a transportation mage to explain the situation to me in person. It would have only taken a day or so. I'm sure you could have afforded it. I couldn't have come, Watercress said. I needed to watch over Basil. I needed to ensure his owners wouldn't try to keep him through some legal loophole. I had to convince King Citrine. Speaking of your precious apprentice, where is he? I chose not to bring him with me. I wasn't sure how he'd be received. Basil better understood that decision and considered leaving, since his initial curiosity had been satisfied. But he was intrigued as to the rest of the story, so he stayed to learn more. Of course, probably better that you didn't. I can't imagine how uncomfortable the situation would be otherwise. Poppy, he's so special, if you met him. Looks like I can't, as you haven't brought him. Another decision you made alone, I'm sure. Raw emotion emanated from her like radiation. I should move on, given Poppy's feelings toward me, but I'm so enthralled. That's not fair. Can't you trust me? Trust you over what? Poppy paced around the laboratory's island, her coral-colored robes trailing her path. When she moved beyond Watercress's form, Basil finally spotted her. She had a medium complexion with coily brown hair. She was more striking than Basil expected. Basil had always imagined Poppy to be as old as Rosemary. Since speaking with Master Turmeric, he hadn't reimagined a new face for her. Watercress paced after Poppy. Trust that I did what I thought was best. No, I can't. We had our whole lives planned. We had magic to perfect. Then you discarded all our aspirations because you wanted to take on an apprentice. If he was so special, why couldn't you take him with you? Why couldn't we raise him together? Why was he more special to you than your own future children? Basil felt terrible for both himself and his master, but he understood Poppy's point. Basil felt worse knowing Watercress had bottled up his feelings for her all this time, sacrificing his love to raise a spoiled kid like him. Basil didn't feel nearly as special as his master portrayed him. He wasn't even a sorcerer, for goodness sake. I couldn't separate him from his family. It would have been wrong. I still hear the scream of Ether's mother when the healing mages ripped him away from her. I couldn't do that. Watercress said. Basil hadn't considered he might never have known his parents. Unexpected gratitude toward Watercress surged through him. Was it wrong for Master Annis to dig you out of Wichu and the life as a loading docks worker when he claimed you as an apprentice? Did you resent him for separating you from your family? I can tell you I didn't think twice taking Lavender from her life as a rubbish collector for the middens. I wasn't always grateful for the improved circumstances. I did resent my master on occasion. Basil wasn't convinced of his answer. Why couldn't I move with you to Sithika then? It would have put you at risk, Watercress said. Basil wasn't sure what answer he expected, but it wasn't that. Bewilderment replaced his gratitude. At a greater risk than hunting a raven basilisk, than establishing the sacred bond of the Six. What is the sacred bond of the Six? Yes, she shook her head. I struggled to believe that. So with just the two of you, did you continue your learning experiments then? Basil didn't know of what Poppy spoke again. I leveraged what I learned to develop Basil's brain so learning would come quickly and easy to him, Watercress admitted. Basil's mouth fell open. While the research sounded enthralling, he also resented being an unwitting participant. He became your lamb after you lost your sheep at the college. What, did you not want to add any confounding variables by moving him from Sithika, by adding me to the equation? No, Poppy, that wasn't it, Watercress said. Exhaustion edged his voice. Then what is it? Is he a prophet? A dimension hopper? A shapeshifter? From a different dimension entirely? I'm assuming he isn't a Raisaglai in disguise. So what makes him so special? I can't tell you, Watercress said. Basil couldn't believe his master kept parts of his life hidden from someone he shared so much with. It made Basil feel particularly better that he wasn't the only one, but he had plenty of questions flashing around his mind. How could one man have so many secrets from the people he cares most about? I'm sorry, Watercress continued. I don't think you are. You won't answer for old wounds. I know I can't ask for your forgiveness. I changed the direction of our lives without consulting you. I want you to know I had a reason that I thought was worth it, and I didn't want to endanger you as a result. Does Master Annis know what this reason is? Poppy asked. No. He was a father to you. And I kept it from him to protect him, just as I kept it from the lifelong love of my heart. Watercress's confession to her seemed to have no impact, for Poppy asked, Has he ever met Basil? No, but if he had, he too would understand what makes Basil so special. You aren't making any sense, she said, exasperated. I hope I never do, for your sake. Basil desperately desired to understand his master's subtext. Something registered on her face. Watercress, tell me you didn't lie to the High King. His master did not reply. Watercress had kept his relationship with Poppy a secret from Basil, and his reason for taking Basil as an apprentice from her. His master had lied to the Major General about Basil's abilities, and now he beguiled their High King. Furious, Basil couldn't take the secrets anymore. He barged into the laboratory. What do I not know about myself? What have you done to me? Why did you lie to the High King? Poppy closed her eyes, and a pained expression settled on her face after she looked at Basil. Basil, I told you to wait. And I said something was wrong, so I followed you. What experiments did you conduct on me? Poppy threw up her hands and left the laboratory, avoiding the glass shards along the floor. I cast a permanent enchantment of learning on your brain. I have the same one on mine. You have learned at an accelerated rate your entire life. You can remember every word of every book from the first time you read it. You will never forget any of your memories or the faces you came across in passing. You'll pick up trades, arts, and languages faster than anyone else possibly could. It is also possible that the enchantment is to blame for your heightened sense of smell, he said without making eye contact with his apprentice. Is that related to lying to the High King? Basil demanded. In part. What did you lie about? I told him no mistruths. However, I still cannot give you a better explanation. I will tell you at the end of the crusade, when we have safely returned to Sithika. The promise of information did not satisfy Basil. Why did Poppy react like that when I came in? What does she know that I don't? She knows why I left her to raise you. What, do we look alike? Are we kin or something? Are you my real father? Basil had difficulty guessing why else she'd be so vexed. No, I'm not your father. But I cannot tell you, Basil. Please go back to the crusade until I come for you. Please. His master sounded defeated, but Basil didn't care. He was too livid to care. Basil left through the door to the waiting room. He heard Tome watch over him before the door closed, but Basil chalked it up to a foolish man casting a prayer that would fall on non-existent ears. Once Basil left the hospital, he knew he needed to vent his frustrations. While he considered turning to faith for guidance through a forgiveness meditation, he decided to work on a job instead. On the way to collecting his supplies, he passed an outfitter stand, boasting warm wools. The march through Gia will also be cold. It would be nice to have an extra layer. Basil envisioned how the garments would fit between his cotton tunic and fur coat. He checked the label, and the diagram pictured a peridot table cut. I can afford it, but I can't get distracted from saving for 9 first. I can splurge on whatever I want after that. Basil returned to Boss New's cart to grab his masonry supplies, but he promptly left to find work in the local craftsman's guild hall. I doubt Watercress will find me there. He isn't going to ruin my time in Trelia with his lukewarm explanations. Still, what could the secret be? Burying the feelings, he wandered through the city that must have rivaled the Blessed Lands in radiance. As one of the tallest buildings in Trelia, the guild hall was easy to find, although the route to it was lengthy. Inside the hall, the setup was nearly the same as Nanvia's guild hall. On the journey over to Trelia that morning, Basil had questioned Billet as to his intentions for the day. Billet had told him he would spend his time at a close friend's forge. So, when Basil approached the section for the stonemasons, he didn't bother to look around for his prior employer. The other masons scrutinized Basil as he approached, mostly judging him for carrying all his tools with him. Doubt nearly drove him back out the door, but he ignored them. He would make the most of his time. As Basil took a seat on the tall stool alone at a table, he glanced around, searching for customers. Everyone in the masonry section was discussing the art of the craft. He looked to the wall, and there were several sheets of parchment nailed to the boards. The largest explained the laws regarding labor and the fair wage, which was set at 30 coins per turn of the suns, or an equivalent gemstone-sized cut. Beside the main piece of parchment were requests for long-term masonry work and advertisements for shops that supplied generic tools and supplies, such as chisels and mortar mix. I probably should have thoroughly read the laws before accepting the job the last time, but the essential bits only said to expect payment after the completion of the labor, which I'm accustomed to anyway. He kept searching for a potential employer. Behind him, at a table even more isolated from the group than Basil's, a boy a few rotations younger than he was also looked around self-consciously. He wore clothes that were plainer than those Basil had seen around the city. Due to his distance from the masonry section, the boy might have been looking to hire a glass blower, but he faced the masons rather than the glassmiths. If he had been interested in glass, Basil still could help him, but he had neither the supplies nor space for it. Basil took his chances. A moment later, the boy made eye contact with Basil. Basil thought it was a good sign, and he ventured over to introduce himself. I'm Wythe, Basil lied. Are you in need of a bricklayer? Yes. A cart full of limestone blocks rolled down a hill and smashed into my parents' home. It busted a brick and some of the, whitish bit with the wood planks. The boy used gestures to convey his meaning. The half-timbering? I guess. I don't know. I'm just a lamplighter, the boy said. Flicker, by the way. Nice to meet you, Flicker. I'd be happy to help fix your parents' house, Basil said. Flicker confessed. We can't pay you a full wage for the work. My family has fallen on hard times. Basil realized why he sat to the side without any of the other masons taking his offer. To keep the feelings of his master's betrayal at bay, Basil took pity on the family of lamplighters and accepted the job. It made him feel better to show an act of kindness, and besides, he had made extra from Mill's generosity. He didn't mind spreading the goodwill around. Thank you so much. No one has been willing to look at it. The other stonemasons laughed at me when I asked them. It's no trouble. I'm passing through town, so if the damage is too great, I might not have time to complete the work. It's not major damage. I doubt it would take more than a day to complete, at least for the brick repair. We'll have to find a woodcarver for the, half-timbering, as you call it, Flicker said. If Basil could find the right supplies, he considered fixing the half-timbering as well, even if he wasn't paid for it. All right, Flicker, if you lead the way, I can get to work. Flicker showed Basil out of the guild hall. It was a good idea to bring your tools with you, Flicker pointed to the bucket. When we spoke with the man whose cart plowed into our house, he ignored my parents' request for compensation. They attempted to seek restitution with the trading company through our queen, but the merchants tossed the smallest shards of their gem pouches at us and said their debt was settled. It's not nearly enough, but it is all we have to offer, Flicker said on the trip to the house. It'll do, Flicker. Perhaps Flicker's family should have involved the Imperial soldiers in the matter of reimbursement. Aside from the damage to the brick and half timbering, Flicker's home looked like all the others in Ikasu. The hole itself wasn't gaping, but Basil would lose Jim on this project from the cost of replacing the damaged bricks. We have some spare brick, Flicker said a moment later, as though reading Basil's thoughts. Basil smiled at the happy coincidence, but wondered if everyone else could read him as well as Watercress could. Do you have an extra bucket, perchance? Basil asked. I can collect one for you. When Flicker returned with the bucket and finished fetching the aforementioned bricks, Basil got to work repairing the damage to the outer wall. Observable to all the passing street-goers, the work was much less private than the repair to Mill's garden wall in her backyard. Occasionally, someone watched him work before moving on. They were simply curious rather than expecting him to fail, which was usually the case in Sithica. Even so, Basil's ears heated when he had an audience, and he focused on his task at hand. He received a few reassuring compliments and comments that he should fix someone else's home next. He didn't think the remarks were serious, just the city folk encouraging him. After yet another stranger paused to study his hand, their presence prevented him from being alone with his thoughts. It removed his mind from his traitorous tutor, and it made him feel better. Toward the setting of the first sun, fewer people traveled the streets, done with the business of the day. Flicker's family of lamplighters paid Basil before they left to begin their evening work. Basil was impressed they trusted him enough to work in their absence, but perhaps they considered the work he had put in already worth the gem shards. Anything additional was on him. In terms of the standard wage, it checked out. But Basil removed the damaged brick and replaced it anew into the setting of the second sun, Hinuk. Working undisturbed, his mind finally started wandering. What is Watercress's secret? Even if he's not my blood relation, does the information relate to my parents? Does he hide it for their sake? What could it be? What if I'm actually a noble? Maybe he switched me at birth to protect me from assassins. Or perhaps I have some long-lost talent? Cheering interrupted his thoughts. It grew into a calamity as a procession crested the hill. The city folk left their homes to join the celebrating crowds. Regional golden guards marched through the road surrounding one of the Ikasuish royal family members. Princess Celestine is coming! Someone across the street shouted. As she approached, the most striking feature about the princess was her skin tone. Basil had never seen skin so dark, pure black. She reminded him of the shy slices of the moon, or the eternal space that separated the stars. She was beautiful, and he was immediately attracted to her. To celebrate the festival of the peacock, she wore a dress honoring the creature's colors. Her silk-white bodice led into a skirt and train of vibrant green, blue, and purple hues. With it, white feathers encircled her head and trailed down her back to meet the dress. White feathers also emerged from her thick hair cords. Princess Celestine couldn't have been more than a rotation or so different in age than Basil, but he recognized the similarity meant nothing. A young woman with the amount of social esteem she enjoyed would be even piggier than Zalafin. Basil knew she would never consider someone like him. As the princess passed, she was the picture of poise. She glanced at him with striking eyes, and it was everything to Basil. Apparently, the exchange resonated with her as well, for she requested her guards to halt. She approached him, her dress dragging on the dusty brick street, and sweat sprouted on the back of his neck. While she was intriguing, she was also intimidating, given her position. Where she was an icon of cultural and political significance, he had dried mortar crusted on his hands and trousers. She undercut his self-consciousness when she smiled at him. Up close, she was a marvel. Everything about her radiated joy and magnificence, and she smelled of moonflower. I do not think I have seen you before, she said with a kindly tone. I arrived with the crusade today, Your Grace. Basil struggled with his words. In the back of his mind, he feared he was in trouble for not belonging. I see. I could not have believed I had not noticed a face such as yours. If I had known I would receive such a welcome, I would have come sooner. He wasn't sure how to talk to someone so stately. He never had before. She found his reply humorous and giggled. Well, you are more than welcome. I hope the crusade will be around until the end of the festival. I would love to see you at the ending ceremony. I'd love that, Your Grace. He nodded to her before she returned to her guards. One of the white peacock feathers flew free upon a short breath of wind, and Basil caught it. He made to return it, but when the princess turned to see him approaching, she waved for him to keep it. He couldn't imagine how valuable the feather was. Not only was the peacock a legendary animal companion, but white coloring was the rarest among the ostentations. In the story of Losihe the Generous's life, the peacock companion had white feathers. To safeguard the treasure, Basil slipped the feather inside his tunic as the procession disappeared into the cityscape. He couldn't believe he had spoken with a member of Ikasu's royal family. While he had seen Loking Citrine give the occasional address, Basil had never spoken with him individually, and he hadn't ever seen his son, Prince Cornerupine. The kingdom of Ikasu continuously astounded Basil. He wondered if the princess's interest in him was because she hadn't seen him before, or if she possibly found him attractive. Perhaps his amber eyes had caught her gaze. In the southern kingdoms, any shade other than dark brown or black was an oddity. He hoped she was interested in him. He wanted to see more of her. Basil finished replacing the final brick and cleaned up his mess from the project. Reluctant to return to camp to see his master again and receive a lecture on eavesdropping, which would ruin his improved mood, he dawdled through the darkening streets. Flicker's family had lit all the lanterns along his route, and Trelia had adopted a romantic ambiance. Some fountains had so many lights surrounding them that the crystal blue water reflected the illumination the exact way it would have during the day. Conversely, intense orange light and dramatic shadows streaked building fronts and bridges to add a layer of anticipation and mystery to the city. Back half-lit alleys became private rendezvous locations for lovers, and Basil imagined himself and Princess Celestine meeting in one. If Basil weren't caked in mortar and carrying his tools, he would have liked to explore Trelia further, but he was exhausted from the work, and his tools were heavy. When Basil found Boss New's cart, he interchanged his masonry tools for his tent and supply bag. For safekeeping, Basil placed the peacock feather inside the spell tome as a bookmark while he assembled his tent. After the day of work, he was famished and wished to speak of his run-in with the princess, but he couldn't find Anate's Brusite or Teleos. Basil stood in line at one of the fires for the cooks to serve him the simmering stew. Since the crusade had entered the plentiful lands of Ikasu, the food had greatly improved in terms of diversity of ingredients and spices. Meat had also been more abundant in the rations. While Basil enjoyed his meal alone, he thought of ways to meet the princess again. If he had the guts, he could ask her to attend the Festival of the Peacock's closing ceremony with him. There won't be a chance of that, though. She'll be surrounded by suitors from the noble houses of Ikasu, and maybe even the royal princes and princesses from Gia and Devor. She'd probably promised to one of them for the good of the kingdom. But I still want to hope. He finished the soup and turned to the spell tome. He studied it until he fell asleep, peacock feather in hand. The following morning, Basil awoke alone. None of his friends had returned in the night. He had expected Teleost would be busy with restocking duties, but he hoped Brusite and Anates would have shown up. As he treated a few patients still lingering around camp, Watercress found him. Basil. I'm treating a patient. Basil didn't turn to meet his master's gaze. We need to announce ourselves to Lou Queen Amatrine today, Watercress said. I know that you may not want to. I'll go. Basil might have resisted his master's request, but he sought any opportunity to see Princess Celestine again. Watercress's ears perked up slightly. It was a subtle cue, but one Basil knew. His master hadn't foreseen his response. Basil was pleased that he could surprise his master, but he kept his emotions in check to prevent it from showing on his face. He didn't want Watercress to think he was absolved from the previous day's occurrences. I need to finish with my patients. I'll wait for you by the entrance to the bridge. Watercress sounded wounded, but Basil wasn't going to forgive him just because his master was miserable. The only way Watercress could ameliorate their rift was if he explained himself. As soon as Basil completed closing others' superficial wounds, he confronted his much deeper personal one. Basil, please. If you aren't going to tell me the truth, then I don't want to hear what you have to say, Basil said. I will practice proper social etiquette in front of company, but do not mistake my composure for forgiveness. I've raised you for 15 rotations. I taught you dozens of crafts so you could know the world and what you want from it. I gave you every book and spell tome I could, so you could live 1,000 adventures. Do you think I did all of that because I wanted to hurt you, or because I wanted to help you? Can you not afford me an ounce of trust that I am trying to protect you still? I don't need protection, Basil said. The Vahantri have only targeted soldiers thus far. I should be perfectly safe. But he has a point. He's been a father to me in all ways but biologically. Still, he needs to realize I can handle the truth. This knowledge would put you in harm's way, as it has now endangered Poppy. This part of you should remain anonymous, Watercress said. Anatase had desired anonymity to maintain her safety, and the exposure had placed her in danger. Perhaps this could be comparable? Then again, it had not been protection from knowledge about herself she'd required. Regardless, Basil appreciated situational safety and ignorance. He also trusted his master to have his best interests at heart. If Watercress tells me the truth at the end of the crusade, what are another few turns of the moons to wait? Though Basil was peeved he didn't have a say regarding the enchantment on his brain originally, he also recognized the benefit of keeping it. Having a memory that would never fade would be a great advantage for his whole life. Still, he would not budge now. Basil's ego had been damaged, so he did not want to make amends during their journey to the Garden Castle. In a few days, he might reconsider. The remainder of the walk was an awkward silence. Nearing the castle's outer moat, Watercress instructed, "Examine the upcoming guard's armor in great detail." The guard asked their business. Basil studied the lines of the metal joints and the gaps in the golden-plated armor. "We are healing mages, traveling with the crusade, and we seek to announce ourselves to Low Queen Amatrine." The guard conjured a shimmering force field bridge across the moat to the castle's doors. A defensive mage. Given that the last magical barrier he had crossed had killed a gross of soldiers, Basil hesitated to step out onto the translucent bridge ahead of him. Using his teaching voice, Watercress said, "Focus on the other side." Basil managed his way across, concentrating as his master commanded, but disquiet bubbled in his gut. Watercress stood behind him, coaxing him forward. Basil would have been more reassured if he hadn't been in front. After they made it to the platform, Basil took in the beautifully carved wood of the castle's double doors. Carvings depicting Losihe and her peacock adorned them. Like the limestone castle, the garden castle was comprised of limestone blocks, but there was much more color adorning the garden castle. Flowering bushes grew on every available balcony, with vines woven into works of art along the castle's walls. Wood framed the castle windows, and the tiles of the castle's roof were stained a deep green. At the peak of the castle flew 3 flags, one for the kingdom of Ikasu, one for the realm of Coserai, and one for the archangel's festival. Although the castle currently blocked the view, hedges and trees encircled the back greens. Watercress led the way inside. "We proceed straight in?" Basil asked, perplexed. Queen Amatrine recruits weather mages from the college to maintain temperate weather over the entirety of her kingdom's domain. As a result, she lacks staffing in other areas, such as combative and defensive mages, his master said, as though reciting the knowledge from a book. "Otherwise, there might have been another layer of security for us to pass through." "I see. Why did you have me concentrate?" Basil asked. "Was it because of the mage?" "Yes." Watercress navigated the castle, familiar with the layout. "Are we safe from him now that we are out of his line of sight?" "Yes." "Before the guard conjured the bridge, how did you know he was a mage?" "I've been here before." "When?" Had it been the same time he had lied to the High King? In Basil's living memory, Watercress had never contacted or seen Panite. His master looked at him curiously, studying him. Inquiring about Watercress's past fell outside of the required social etiquette Basil had referenced earlier, but he wanted to know. However, if his master accidentally let additional information slip that pointed him toward his own truth, Basil would gladly collect whatever clues he could. "I came when I was to enroll at the Mages' College. Here, Master Fathom transported Poppy and me to the Mages' College in Emphanai." Basil did not respond. He wondered if Watercress would answer any question he wanted out of guilt, as long as it wasn't related to the principal secret. As the pair approached the throne room, Basil decided to test the theory later. Basil would have expected the queen to dictate orders atop her throne. Instead, the row of thrones was empty. The room bustled with movement. Soldiers and servants darted from one side to the other, coming in from one hallway and exiting an opposite door carrying crates filled with supplies. Hung high on the back wall of a feast hall, a square canvas painting depicted 2 nymphs. A forest nymph stood in the shadow of trees, but reached out for a light nymph that reclined among the leaves, shining bright green in the sun's rays. As with every other artwork Basil had encountered, it was indisputably a masterpiece. Below the art, tables had been cleared from the center of the room to line the open walls. Soldiers in gold and bronze armor spoke to each other to then depart for another conversation. In the commotion, Basil searched for the queen. Watercress swept through the crowd, and Basil followed. On their way over, Teleos waved at Basil while carrying a basket of citrus fruits. Basil nodded in acknowledgement, but then flicked his eyes toward his master to indicate his preoccupation. Teleos returned the nod. Basil gathered his nerves. He wished he had nicer clothes, but his tunic and trousers had been through weeks of travel and wear from his odd jobs on the road. At a minimum, he could have washed his garments in the water running through the city, but he hadn't prioritized it. He wished he had. He stank. Given the circumstances, it would be possible, but given that he wanted to impress the princess, he needed to ensure she didn't notice. I'd have better luck meeting Asiel in the flesh. When he finally caught view of her, he stiffened in anticipation. The princess wore a brightly patterned fitted bodice and draping sash that were no less striking than her peacock dress the day before. The bodice exposed part of her midriff, and Basil struggled not to focus on it. The fabrics were golden, making her look like a sun goddess. Basil did not think the style was traditional to the area, but as she was a princess, importing any region's fashion must have been no issue. She also had a gold tiara and thin golden ribbons woven into her dark hair. It was only once he and his master approached the queen did Basil's attention shift to the older woman. She looked like her daughter, but much older and taller. Though she had the same poise, she had none of her daughter's playfulness, only regal stature. Where her daughter had trinkets woven into her hair cords, the queen's head was shaved and bore a gilded crown with crystal butterfly wings extending toward her ears. The princess took a position next to her mother when Watercress introduced them. Basil again smelled moonflower on her as the rustling fabrics in her skirts settled. Lo Queen Amatrine, I am Master Watercress of Honston, and this is my apprentice, Basil of Sithica. As healing mages, we are at your service for the duration of your stay in your kingdom. At the mention of Basil's name, the princess looked intrigued. Basil and Watercress performed the honorific hand motion to the queen. It is a pleasure to see you, and it is a pleasure to meet you, the queen said warmly to each in turn. She maintained a welcoming but staid composure. If Basil had known better, he could have mistaken her for a benevolent spirit that guarded a hallowed woodland to which he had been granted passage. I would like to introduce my daughter, Princess Celestine. The queen glided a hand in the direction of her daughter, and the sleeves of her dress followed after. Princess Celestine gave a wide smile and said, We are so happy to welcome you to the Garden Castle. I hope you enjoy your stay here. Basil shot a surprised glance to his master. The prospect of residing in the castle elated him. Yes, all the nobles and mages of the crusade are to be given rooms in the castle, the queen said. We mostly parsed them out yesterday upon the first day of announcements, but there are still plenty remaining. If you head to the table of my administrative assistant Provision, he will provide you the necessary information. Using a bent hand, the low queen directed to Provision's table and resumed the work she had been doing. The princess returned to assisting her mother in preparing supplies for the crusade. She beamed as she studied her paperwork and snuck shy glances toward Basil. Basil reluctantly followed Watercress toward the assistant. Name placards placed atop tables distinguished when they found the right one. Provision assigned them rooms, provided them with keys, explained where the main dining hall was, and showed them how to navigate the castle. In Basil's opinion, his and his master's rooms were sufficiently separated from one another. Setting foot in a castle and being treated as an honored guest thrilled Basil beyond words. Mostly, though, he was excited for the opportunity to be close to Princess Celestine. Perhaps they would accidentally run into each other on occasion. When Basil saw his room, he was awestruck. The room had a bed. He had never slept in a bed before. Back home, he slept in a hammock to conserve space in the shop, and on the road he had been camping on the ground. He was ecstatic. There were other decorative and useful furnishings too. Dainty dressers, pleated curtains, woven rugs, heavy trunks, and iron lanterns. Even so, Basil couldn't focus on any but the bed. He carefully sat on the eider-down mattress and rubbed his hand over the unfamiliar material of the topmost blanket. It was softer than fur. Provision said, A resident alchemist recently discovered that material. Every room of the castle now has a blanket of it, a material called polyalkyl. It's magnificent, Basil said, petting it repeatedly to revel in the plushy sensation. She'll be delighted to hear that, Provision said. If you require anything else during your stay, I will be at my table. Thank you. After Provision left, Basil explored the rest of the room. There was a hanging rack for clothes and a few mirrors on the walls. Toward the back of the room was a closed door. Am I permitted to enter? He knocked. After a long pause, without response, he knocked again, louder. Then he tried the handle. It was open. When he entered, he couldn't have had a better surprise waiting for him. He had a private closet with a toilet and a bath and some other device he had never seen before, but he assumed it functioned with water due to the drain along the floor beneath it. In Scythica, the bathing houses were public places, as were the toilets, for all except the aristocracy, nobles, and royals. Even in Trelia, Basil had seen the same, but in the garden castle, he received his own private bathing chambers. He couldn't wait to make use of everything in the room. He tested the unknown device, and it created an artificial waterfall from the ceiling. He had seen the city folk at the base of the waterfalls, bathing in them. Perhaps this device was for a similar purpose, but with increased convenience. Rather than trudging down to the base of the falls, the royals could enjoy the sensation from the comfort of their rooms. When Basil noticed 6 folded towels in the cabinet, he supposed he had to share the small chamber, but there was not a secondary entrance to the room. All these towels are for me! He would be sorrowful to leave the indulgent lifestyle behind for the road, but he had to remind himself that the crusade was the only reason he enjoyed such luxuries. He returned to the bed and rolled atop the blanket, taking in the sensation of the soft fibers. He guessed how much such a cover would cost. Probably a perfect round cabochon cut worth 10,000 metal coins. Perhaps 2 of them. It was probably worth the price of a small house. A nice house at that. He might never have anything so lavish again. He considered taking it with him when the crusade left, but Provision would know who had stolen it. For the time he had access to it, Basil decided he would make the most of it. A knock came from the bedroom's hall door. Basil quickly rose to answer it, relieved he hadn't undressed for a nap. He expected Watercress had come to apologize, but he was pleasantly surprised to be wrong. Princess Celestine waited for him. She must have gotten lost looking for someone else. Perhaps D4? It would make sense if she wanted to invite the Major General to a planning meeting. Hello, Basil. Would it please you to walk with me through the gardens? It wasn't an accident. Recovering from his shock, he smiled and said, Yes, it would. He left the bedroom, closing the door behind himself. His innards felt like they wrapped around his spine in apprehension as he fell into step beside her. I wish I had washed in the bath, or that waterfall thing. I have to say, you are a mystery. She navigated him around the verdant, tapestry-lined hallways. How's that? Am I going to be in trouble for lying to Flicker and his family? Yesterday, you were a mason. Today, you are a healing mage. Tomorrow, will you be a spiritual leader? There was no malice or suspicion in her voice, just curiosity. My master is a man of many trades. He passed the knowledge to me, Basil said. But my main profession is a healing mage. I was trying to earn an extra gem the other day. By fixing the house of the family of lamplighters. Her deliberate tone made Basil wonder if she knew about their conundrum with the trading company. At the same time, he was astounded she knew who lived there. Does she know all her subjects? And where they live? He wasn't sure what her question implied. Yes. That was kind of you, she said. I wrote a letter to the head of the Owl Trading Company, but they refused to pay fair compensation. Because the company is based in Gia, we had no authority to force them to pay anything. When my mother wrote to King Diaspor, he claimed the family should be happy to have received anything at all. I was frustrated they could not find justice. Even as she spoke of the wrong, there was never malice or anger in her voice. She sounded spirited and motivated to help the family. I cannot say how it warmed my heart to see your charity to them. It wasn't charity, they paid me. I am certain it was not the full wage, she said, knowingly. I thank you for helping my subjects. Is that the only reason she wished to speak with me? Of course, Your Grace. A moment later, Princess Celestine headed down a grand spiraling staircase. What other trades are you familiar with? Countless. Please stop me if I bore you, but I know all sorts of architecture and construction. I can do brick and stonework in addition to roofing. Basil recounted his other professions breathlessly, surprising even himself with just how many trades he knew. He finished, I also know a little of alchemy and defensive magic. What a blessing your life must be that you are constantly learning new crafts. You could be anything in the world you want. How wonderful that is. Your master must have big plans for you. You are probably more qualified to rule this kingdom than I am, given your extensive knowledge of the struggles of the people and their day-to-day work. Basil had not expected her to be impressed by his lifestyle. Perhaps she's being polite? The only reason I excelled in so many vocations was due to Watercress's enchantment of learning. Basil didn't want to discuss his master, though, so he touched on one of her points. I discover the most about someone based on what their injuries tend to be, he said as a joke, but knowing it to be true. I cannot tell you how often patients have a foreign object in their body that needs to be removed. Her eyebrows knitted together in confusion. Quickly, Basil explained. People swallow the strangest objects. Tells you a lot about them. He hoped she wouldn't understand what else he'd meant, but she accepted the answer and moved on. To integrate all those crafts into a single individual, it must have been hard work. I cannot imagine you have had a break in your whole life. The crusade is the longest break I've ever had. However, my master has me learning a new spell tome even now. But you must not get much of a reprieve either. Maintaining the kingdom's politics and economics is trying work. I only see a sliver of what my mother spends her days sorting out, and I find that alone to be arduous. Perhaps with your ranging knowledge, you might consider returning to Ikasu after the crusade and becoming a vizier to the crown. Basil paused. Is that a serious offer? It can be. Joy lit her eyes. Would I get to live in the castle? Basil asked. Of course. All viziers do. Is that the only condition of your employment? I would want to keep my room's blanket if my employment were ever to terminate. That might be it. He laughed at the trivial stipulation. I could arrange that. But when I become queen, I want a whole cabinet of viziers that bring a range of perspectives. It is easy to limit the world to what one sees during the day. It is hard to identify problems beyond one's own horizon of perception. Having those with many specialties as consultants might be the best way to counter that concern. First, she had admired him for helping someone in need. Then she offered him a job. He assumed she felt positively toward him, but he couldn't discern if she was attracted to him the same way he was to her. Basil supposed he should be more excited about being offered the title of a vizier, but he wasn't sure that was something he would like. Perhaps she offered that option to sustain contact, or maybe she merely considered the prosperity of her kingdom. Basil and the princess navigated through the castle to the gardens. Matching the extravagance of the castle, an equal amount of effort had gone into sculpting the gardens. Level hedges lined the boundaries, standing a story tall. Behind those were bushy trees planted at even intervals. The core of the gardens consisted of bushes, flowers, fruit trees, and fountains. Low limestone barriers separated the walking path from vegetation and water features. Butterflies, dragonflies, and hummingbirds flitted between the flowers, pollinating them as they went. Marble archangel statues ringed the central fountain. Asiel, Vantame, Lilila, Hinksuk, Boya, and Losihe faced outward with their preferred animals by their sides or on their person. Dark and light green plants, teal ferns, light pink flowers, and white petals encircled the statues. Initially, Basil thought there might be the colored flower of each respective archangel present, but the landscaper had selected an aesthetically pleasing over religiously symbolic design. Stepping back, it was perfect, and Basil would not have changed it. Rows of jasmine flowers flourished beneath thin trees, creating partitions within the hedges. White benches designed for two decorated the gardens with a perfect rhythm in their placement. Ivy-covered lattice arches created small hideaway retreats toward the edges. The back row of hedges had a doorway cut out of it, leading to another section. Less a product of woodworking, and more an artwork of a sculptor, a redwood gazebo stood as the main feature. Leaf-shaped shingles hugged the underlying construction and protected those within. Throughout the gardens, people meditated in secluded spots. It must be great to relax here. The gardens have you speechless? She asked as she escorted him into the gazebo. Yes, he said, leaning against one of the railings. Trelia is unlike Sithica. How do you mean? Everything is refreshing here. The buildings breathe with the city. The people are kind. The waterfalls are magnificent, and it feels alive, open, fluid, free. I don't know exactly. I am delighted to hear that is your impression of our kingdom. My mother does her best to promote every type of artisan and craftsman alike here. She wants everyone to do what is in their heart, even if it is a challenge figuring out how to do so. A challenge? Someone has got to clean the plumbing and tend the middens. If you switch the job between workers and allow them to practice their craft the rest of the time, it might work better than having one employee miserable for their whole life. That way, no one's potential would be squandered, and humility could be better maintained in the workforce. Are you acting as my vizier already? She asked. I would if I could, your grace, he said. The only problem with that idea is that it takes time to train someone, she said. It is simply not practical. Basil considered Watercress's enchantment. Perhaps in the future it will be easier to learn. Perhaps in this next age we will advance our understanding of the brain, where we can more effectively teach our children and better utilize the time when their brains are rapidly developing. It struck Basil how his master's enchantment might have worked from a physiological standpoint. I see now, she said, interrupting his scientific line of thought. What you really are, she said. A drop of sweat formed on the back of Basil's neck. Does she think I'm a fraud? He was too nervous to say anything. You may possess the skills of all those workers, but you're a dreamer, an idealist. No, you are more than that. You're a champion, or at least I feel you want to be. Yet you seem held back by something. Basil didn't reply, but rather, this time, it was his turn to wear a confused expression. You are the prodigal apprentice of a prodigal master. How have the two of you not reshaped this world by now, with all your skills, talents, and learnings? I'm no prodigy, Basil corrected. I'll never be able to write a spell tome. If anyone transforms this world, it will be my master, not me. I'm not a sorcerer. I'm basically playing at being a mage. There it is, she said, still upbeat despite the weight of the conversation. Crippling self-doubt. That is what holds you back from your full potential. You and your master both can have whatever role you want to play in this life. He can be successful, and so can you. It does not necessarily have to be in the same way. You can both rise together. Master Watercress is incredibly successful already. One day he will be the personal mage to our own Low King. I'm certain of it. But perhaps I assume that because that position is the highest he will probably go, I expect that's my cap as well. That I shouldn't expect that much even. I do not know if being a vizier to the crown is something you would seriously consider, but which of your trades is your favorite? Do you know what it is that you want to do? Basil thought for a long moment. The conversation that had started casually delved into the core of his being. There was something spectacular about Princess Celestine, but it was also daunting. He had no answer. He had no plan. His current trajectory was to try and not die on his way to the Oracle, so he could return home and then enroll in the Mages' College. Although, if all mages posed a threat to him, he wasn't sure how he could go. The realization hit Basil. Watercress never will let me attend. His promise to tell me his secret at the end of the crusade is likely also a lie. He'll keep putting it off until a mage dies in another town, and I'll be hired there out of necessity, unable to leave lest I want to risk the people's well-being. I don't want to be stuck in one little town for the rest of my life. I like traveling and seeing different places. I don't know what it is I want, but for now, I'm happier than I've ever been. I've developed stronger bonds of friendship than I've ever had. I've feared for my friends in ways I did not from the comfort of the healer's office in Sithica. I've never lost so many patients as I have during the crusade, but it makes it even more rewarding when I do save someone. Not that I want people to die, I just want my abilities to matter. I'm tired of healing minor flesh wounds from a kitchen knife. I want to heal someone impaled by a sword or bitten by a ricegly. It would seem you are on the right path, after all,